Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for the first episode of Added Time in 2021. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe. Going to be answering your questions in today's video that you kindly submitted. But before we get into any of that good stuff, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, hit that like button because it helps out the channel as well. Let's get into your questions. Firstly here from Ngol0, who asked, how do people expect Frank to get it right with all these new players? No training games, no time between games, etc. Can't we judge him after a normal season and give him a preseason too? Is that unreasonable? I don't think it's unreasonable in terms of the preseason argument. Not having a preseason, I think, was a massive challenge for teams this year, especially Chelsea. Bringing in so many players and wanting to integrate them into the first team, not having that and almost having to use the opening weeks of competitive games as a preseason obviously was going to be a challenge. I think the thing that rules out this excuse generally is, and I think it's a very easy one to rebut, is this is something all teams have to deal with. And if you're talking about general things like this season being very unique about obviously the COVID situation, games being called off, losing players due to the virus for a couple of weeks. We've had that with Kai Havertz. Haven't had many of them in the squad so far this season, but losing Kai Havertz obviously for a few weeks. The congested schedule, injuries to players, but you know, Chelsea have a bigger squad to cope with that, more so than other teams who are still doing as well, if not better than Chelsea at the moment in the Premier League. I look at Southampton, I look at Aston Villa especially. They signed quite a few players in the summer too, but they're doing quite well at the moment. And you know, the argument would be they're being better coached despite having lesser funds to invest in the squad and lesser players than Chelsea have at the moment. You know, with Wolves and Everton, there were certain things about those games that were frustrating, you know, in terms of us not being clinical and losing the games narrowly. In the case of Arsenal and Man City, we're getting battered in these games. And those are things I think as fans, it's very hard to be patient with when you're seeing such clueless performances, games being done within 45 minutes. I can accept losing to a team of the quality that Man City have, say if it's a close 2-1 win for them, you know, and Kevin De Bruyne smacks it in the top corner outside the box, you know, and has that quality to do it. If it's a tight contest and we're giving our all and maybe we're a little bit behind them, a bit like last season, that's the issue with this season. We're not competing, it feels like, in these games, at least recently, and that's a real issue for Frank Lampard and why people have major doubts about him moving forward. Flair White asks, realistically, who do you see coming in and going out in this transfer window, including Frank Lampard? I've got a big video coming out about the January transfer window very soon on the channel in terms of my planning for this window. If I was in charge in terms of buy and sell, months back, I think it was like March 2020, I did a video planning the summer transfer window. So it's going to be a bit like that, who I would buy, who I would sell. So please stay tuned for that coming out very soon on the channel. Heritwick asks, we're not playing as a team. We look clueless throughout the whole 90, and while I think that's mostly down to tactics or lack thereof, our work rate lately has been abysmal. We're shooting less as we go deeper into the season, and on top of that, we lack leaders. As much as I love Frank Lampard, I also can't understand the lack of agility during the game. Where do you see this going from here for both him and the club? I think, like the first question, a lot to unpack there. I agree, the in-game management has been a massive frustration recently in terms of subs, in terms of team selection, quite confusing from Frank. I think in terms of subs and what Frank does tactically during a game, because that's not only like the formation and what the team sets out, it's also your in-game management too, about changing things on the fly basically when it's not going right. In terms of subs being really late, but it's like Frank last season, I felt many times got it right with his substitutions if the game wasn't going in Chelsea's direction. I felt that was a massive part of his management last year that really impressed me. It's not working this time, and I guess sometimes that's down to fortune. You know, you bring on a player, they don't have the desired impact. If they come on the pitch and score a goal, you look like a bit of a genius, don't you? But I feel that this year it's not working as well. There are times in games, even when Frank has had injury issues, I felt he could have done more. And yesterday I was a bit surprised, as I'll get to in a coming question as well, about this player, Callum Hudson-Odoi, not featuring. Olivier Giroud, who's been in great form recently, not starting as well. It feels like Frank isn't helping himself in terms of maybe patience and sort of support from the fans in that sense, because it does feel like at the moment he's leaving out players who could benefit him during a difficult period. Lucid FC asks, what is your favourite cafe by the bridge? Not many in terms of the Fulham Road. If you go a little bit further back to the World's End, which is a little bit of a walk away from the bridge, Mona Lisa is an amazing cafe. Gone there for years basically. Does an amazing English breakfast. So if you ever get the chance to go to Mona Lisa before a game, I definitely suggest it. So it's got to be Mona Lisa. Classic place, amazing amazing food. So that's my choice. Miles asked, did Lampard overachieve in his first season? Yes, I think he did. And I think it's easy now to maybe dismiss the first season. I've seen people say that, oh, well, look at Leicester's failings, look at the failings of other teams. I always think, and I saw this with Sarri too, people trying to write off what Sarri did in his year as well. If we're talking about, being consistent about certain managers, I really get frustrated by that, because you play in the season you're in. And although we can reference previous seasons, I think a lot of people, it's always pre-season standards for me, and I always judge that on the current team, the current form, thinking of where I felt the team would be, or my expectations going into that year. And especially after that 4-0 defeat to Man United, a lot of us felt, and a lot of people outside the club are writing Chelsea off as sort of 8th, 10th in the table. For Frank to get 4th place ahead of the likes of Tottenham and Arsenal when we weren't expected to, a lot of people didn't have us in their top 4. And I'm not talking about Chelsea fans, I'm talking about like pundits, paid pundits who didn't predict Chelsea in the top 4. I think you have to give him that. If you're someone who talks about Lampard being naive and not being as good as other managers, and shouldn't be in the job, or there's a lot to do in terms of being a better coach and manager, then him getting into the top 4 was overachieving last season based on your own standards. I think there was a lot last season of shifting of goalposts when Frank wasn't doing as badly as people predicted. So yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's created a rod for his own back this season in terms of the summer spend, all these new players coming in, having to integrate them, the fact that he got top 4 but also getting to an FA Cup final, I think probably raised expectations even higher. But that's what being Chelsea manager is. Alex Thomas asked, what is happening to Kante? Really bad the last few games. Yeah, Kante's form has plummeted. It really has. I feel that there's so much debate, and there has been debate in the past about Kante's positioning, and I'm sure that will come up again in terms of whether he should be further forward. And it feels like such a tired debate at this point. It was working for a period of time. We came up against high-pressing teams like Leeds, and it was working still. I feel that just like the rest of the team, his performances have just really plummeted. I don't think it's down to... I think people will use an excuse maybe for Kante and say that, oh, it's Lampard's fault, his positioning on the pitch. I just think he's individually playing quite poor at the moment, on and off the ball. Mistakes like yesterday, and collectively pushing up the pitch, for that third goal that Kevin De Bruyne scored. It was ridiculous. And, Kante's at fault for giving the ball away. And just all round, I think he's been shocking really recently. And I think you have to call that out, or at least criticise him for that. He's an amazing player. None of us are doubting that. And hopefully he gets back to form pretty soon, because he's an amazing player in that position. And we've seen some brilliant performances from him in that DM position so far. So it's not like he can't play there. I just think at the moment he's really off form, which absolutely is hurting Chelsea in the middle of the pitch. And Max asked, do you think this game can have huge implications on Cho's future at Chelsea? I feel like this one especially was a game where he must have felt that he's done everything to deserve a start. I agree he deserved to start against Man City, even ahead of Ziyech. I know Ziyech is a very important player for Chelsea, but he clearly didn't look fit for me yesterday. At least the fact that he could only play about 60 minutes wasn't having that desired impact. It was very difficult to have an influence on the pitch. And I think, I would have preferred him coming off the bench rather than starting the game. I think the fact that Frank isn't starting Callum, it must be a real kick to him at the moment, Callum, because he's doing everything he can. A bit like earlier in the season, but I think in earlier points, and even like last season when people have called for Callum to play more under Lampard, I think it's been difficult for Lampard because of Ziyech's form and fitness being in the team. You want to keep him in the team. Last season, Pulisic and Willian playing really well, especially in the run-in. I think it's very difficult to justify benching either of those players for Lampard. But now, at the moment, with the current slump in form, with Ziyech just returning from injury, it just felt to me like Frank has got to rely on players who are playing for him at the moment when many aren't, and I think that Callum, Giroud, I think they fall into the same category. I felt like Chelsea's slump in form could be a really good chance for Callum to finally break into the first team again. Not great for Chelsea, but great for him, an opportunity. I felt he took that opportunity both off the bench against Arsenal, but also against Aston Villa. I felt he showed some really good signs in that game, directness, and once again off the bench yesterday, scoring a consolation goal. And the concern for him is now with Ziyech probably going to be back to full fitness, closer to playing 90 minutes. Does he play on the right? Do you want to take out Pulisic? It's a difficult moment, I think, in terms of Frank Lampard, what he's going to do next, because, you want to have Pulisic, you want to have Ziyech, you want to have Callum Hudson-Odoi, but also, the numbers. Do you switch to maybe a 4-2-3-1 and play one of those players like Ziyech centrally in the 10 role, so you can keep 3 of them, Pulisic, Ziyech, and Callum Hudson-Odoi maybe behind a central striker? I'm not entirely sure, but then you're going to lose, obviously, another CM behind you. So it's a very difficult moment, and I think, once again, it's a moment where Callum, despite being a young player, really feels probably hard done by that he's not starting a game like that. And when he isn't starting games like that, when he's actually impressed in games, he's probably wondering, well, what do I have to do to get into the first team? I'm doing everything you're asking of me at the moment, and I'm still not getting a chance. So it's difficult for Callum. I think he should be playing more based on recent form. But that is it for this episode of Added Time. Thank you guys so much for submitting your questions. Sorry to those I didn't get to. Added Time is back for 2021 every Monday, answering your questions. So please submit them on a Sunday when I post on a community page, but also on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you again.